I grew up with a dad who could build or fix anything with nothing but like a shoestring and a paperclip. Kind of MacGyver for anybody who remembers that show. My mom one time said that she wished she had shelves in the garage. And she came home one day and he had just casually built custom cabinets all along the back wall of the garage. That was my childhood. Fast forward, I grew up, fell in love, and married someone who could call people to do those things. I don't have a lot of room to talk. We're just not handy people. And it was never an issue until we went to sell our house. Anybody who's ever put a house on the market knows how stressful that is. A lot of little fix-it jobs pop up. So we hired a handyman. All we had to do was get the supplies. Fantastic. For one of the jobs, they needed gray paint. I sent my husband to Home Depot to pick up this paint. That man came home empty-handed and proceeded to have with me the funniest conversation we've ever had. He said they didn't have any. Home Depot was out of paint. He said, well, we might have to go to an actual paint store or order it online because all they had on the shelves was white. What? All they had on the shelves was white paint. Now, I didn't learn how to do all the handiwork my dad could do, but I did go with him to mix a can of paint a time or two. I thought it was common knowledge. You get the white paint off the shelf, take it to the counter, and they mix it into any color your heart so desires. Based on my experience, I made an assumption about his knowledge level of paint, and as a result, we had no paint. This happened 2.5 years ago, and I still make fun of him for it because, let's face it, it's hilarious. But if we're being honest, we all have gaps in knowledge. We all lack information that other people think we have. And this carries over into our training. You might spend time building this excellent curriculum, but it's based on the idea that the user already knows XYZ things. When they don't know that common knowledge, they're set up to fail because they're left to fill in the gaps with their own assumptions. Sorry about that. Sarah got me with her grief thing. They're left to fill in the gaps with their own assumptions. And I think what we need to be doing as trainers then is to try to identify those assumptions up front. I think it's really important to pay attention to if you've been doing what you do for a long time, especially. I have been in my company in some capacity since 2001. So I've been fully engrossed in our service and our food and our standards longer than a lot of our employees have been alive. It is easy for me to forget how little knowledge baby 19-year-old Christina walked into her first shift with when I'm writing a training program. But it's my job now to make sure I start where she needs me to begin so that I can fill in her knowledge gaps. So let's talk about how to do that. The first goal is to identify the fact that these gaps exist and try to figure out what they are. And there's a few different ways that we can do that. The easiest way is just to pay attention to your regular everyday communication. My husband's in the car industry. We have conversations about our day, and I don't know how many times I have to stop and ask him questions because he starts getting into industry lingo. So I know now when I am having conversations with him, I have to account for that as well. I can't speak in industry lingo either. So by paying attention to that, I know new servers probably need that information. We can also consider the types of questions and emails that we receive from employees seeking clarification. What questions come up when you roll out new ideas? What questions come up when you put out a training? That's where those gaps in knowledge are. And here's a good way that I found to do it. Have someone outside your department look at your work. Our corporate chef writes all of our recipes, and for the most part, anything he puts out makes perfect sense to all of our cooks. But they're not the only ones using those recipes. Our MITs go through kitchen training. They might not be culinary by nature. I'm not. I grew up on the service side. So he has me look at his recipes, and I'm able to look at it and say, oh, it says to put on the stove, over what heat? How long between these steps? Things that he left out because he thought they were common knowledge. So that's kind of a great way that we do that. Once we have identified those gaps, we need to overcome them. So the next goal is to take that insight and use it to eliminate and prevent those gaps from even appearing in our training programs. Now, we could just build more information into those programs, but that might make your training really long and heavy. So instead, maybe we take a fully comprehensive program and we break it down into small steps. And then we allow the users to test out. They only have to start the training where their knowledge gap begins. So maybe a long-tenured employee will take a 5-step program, start at step 5. A newer employee has to start at step 1. We can also leverage our LMS for this. You can assign out training based off of who's completed other trainings. So we kind of have that avenue to explore those knowledge gaps. Or we can provide supplemental information, and technology training is big for me with this. Our oldest brand was established in 1955, and I have a very long-tenured managers there who are not good with computers. We still hand-wrote tickets there 10 years ago. So if I put out something on Excel, it confuses them. They might call me because they think it's broken because they're trying to enter the word March into the date field that requires a 3. This happens. So I can put out a troubleshooting guide along with my training so that they have access to that. Not everybody has to look at it, but it's there if they need it. Now, the last goal is to turn this into effective employee communication. And this is something that applies to all leaders, not just trainers in the company. We need to recognize these gaps in knowledge when we're dealing with performance issues. Is the employee slacking, or do they have a gap in knowledge preventing them from high performance? Consider this approach, a supervisor to a manager. Hey, you have too many payroll issues. Next time, I'm taking out of your bonus. Or, you seem to have a lot of recurring issues with payroll. Can you walk me through how you were taught to do that? I guarantee looking for those knowledge gaps will give you the outcome you desire way more effectively than focusing on punishment. So in conclusion, we all have gaps in knowledge, and I hope this helps spark something in you to be able to look at your programs and identify those. I don't know that it would have helped me with my husband, because I married the only person on the planet who doesn't know how paint works. But like a good trainer, I was able to turn it into something educational. So if you have those things, that's a fun way to handle it too.